Hello, hello. Welcome to the first show this year of StepUp. We're joined today by Ben Smith, who we'll get some intros to in a minute, but thought I'd start by saying Happy New Year. I realise it's already the 20th of Jan, but this is our first show as the scheduling has worked out since the year. So Happy New Year to everyone. And then Ben, perhaps if you want to do a quick intro.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Ben. I'm a principal developer advocate for Serverless, based in London.
Fantastic, great. So we've got the two Bens today. So I wanted to, just before we dive into the main topic of today, which is going to be Serverlesspresso and some of the cool new announcements around that, I wanted to just very quickly touch on, I know I'm springing this on you as well, Ben, but just touch on one of the announcements that we've already had this year in the serverless world, which is how Lambda and SQS have now got this ability to configure a maximum concurrency. So I was surprised already since reInvent we've got this announcement come out. Certainly for me and my customers, quite an exciting one. I think the model used to be that people would set like a reserved concurrency if they wanted to sort of throttle how Lambda polled SQS, but now people can just set it. So I don't know if you've heard much buzz yet about people putting this to good use, but it seems like a great one to have out there.
Yeah, it kind of snuck out there to not a lot of fanfare, but it's a really cool little feature. I think there's no extra cost for using it as well, right?
That's right, yeah. And it's a much better model as well. Well, like when people were using reserve concurrency to do this, obviously any reservation is taken away from your account level limit, but it also meant that the unintended side effect was that people would see throttling behavior, which meant retries could be a bit inconsistent. So if you don't need your SQS queue to be drained at lightning speed now, then you can just set that limit and let it sort of chug in the background, which brilliant announcement. As you say, not much fanfare, unfortunately. So hopefully, if people are hearing about it for the first time, go play with it, have a look at it, see if it's useful.
I've already started using it on a little POC where I'm trying to connect a REST API to Asana using Asana webhooks, right? And Asana, they limit you to a certain number of webhook invocations per month per account, I think. Right. So using that as a kind of queuing mechanism to kind of batch up items before sending it to Lambda is straight away like instant usage for it. It's funny how these things get launched as you're currently building stuff, and just keeping an eye on how they can help you is part of the battle, right? Seeing when they come out.
Amazing. Yeah, no, it's good. So I hope people take advantage of it. I've certainly had this before with customers where they've had this massive influx of events, and like you say, there's an opportunity to batch, but just the nature of how they come in, SQS and Lambda do what they do best, which is to scale virtually infinitely, and the customer gets the performance when they don't always need it. So having this now is super cool. Great. All right. Well, I wanted to mention as well, we've got Beck in the chat. She's not able to come on camera this week and join us, but she's still with us. So do say hello in the chat if you're missing her. Right, Ben, what are we here to talk about? I've heard about something called Serverlesspresso.
Yeah, Serverlesspresso is the coffee ordering app that's sweeping across the globe at various AWS summits and technology events. And it's been kind of a revelation in terms of like a POC or a usable serverless production ready web application that help people like instantly understand how you can put some services together to build something that's instantly useful.
How did it start? Where did the idea come from?
So the idea came, I believe James Bezic can get most of the credit for the idea. So what we wanted to do was just to create as a team, the Serverless Developer Advocate team, a real serverless app which will show people that serverless is something that you can really use as a model, as a technology, or a group of technologies to build your systems on. And we wanted something that everyone's familiar with, and we wanted something that solves a problem at an event. So we decided to pick reInvent, which is, as you know, our big annual customer event of the year. And the problem we picked was getting a decent cup of coffee, right? So it's just Starbucks in Vegas, which is where reInvent is normally held. So we found a pun and worked backwards from there, essentially, this idea of Serverlesspresso. How can we use serverless technologies and put them together in such a way that people can walk up to a booth, to a bar, a sort of coffee bar in the expo hall, and understand exactly what they have to do, order a coffee, see a menu on their phone, right? Send that order into the system that we built, and have the baristas then pick up that order and make their coffee. And all the different kind of services around that is very documented, and we share the code on how we do it. And there's various workshops out there now showing you how this application was built.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. No, that's a good summary. I think one of my favorite things actually about Serverlesspresso is when we're helping out these large events and you have customers come up and say, what's this all about? The first thing they ask you normally is, where's the queue? Like, where do I stand to line up for my free coffee?
Yeah.
Well, you explain this serverless.
Yeah, especially the British people, right?
Especially the Brits, we love queuing. So I think that's one of the cool things, though, is that the architecture for this, and I'm sure you're going into some detail on this in a minute, is all very much event driven. But then so is the experience for the customers as well, right? Because they are turning up in whatever order they want to turn up in and scan that code to get started. It doesn't depend on standing in that serialized queue being processed one customer at a time. I think that's a real nice sort of reflection of the experience.
Yeah, I mean, of course there is a queue, but that's all managed in the system by the ordering of events that are coming in, right, as people scan. And it actually created a really interesting problem, right? When we would take this Serverlesspresso booth, as we did. So going back, we ran this at reInvent. It was very successful in that people really enjoyed using an application that was built entirely on serverless technology, with some people from the team standing around and explaining to them what they've just used, and a discussion would always arise around what customers are currently using and how this might be a useful way of building applications, right? So as a result of that, we took Serverlesspresso to various summits last year, to lots of other technology events, small and large. And in some of the smaller events where it's just, a couple hundred people in the expo hall, or maybe some events where people weren't really wanting to come and talk to people at the booth, we had the reverse problem where people would come and speak to the baristas and say, yeah, I'll get a latte, please. And the barista would say, oh, no, can you go ahead and scan the QR code? And the customer would be like, oh, but I just want a latte. Can you just make it for me? And so we found that when there's no queue at all, it's kind of, it has the reverse problem, right? It's kind of adding complexity, which was an interesting problem to sort of pop up. But we only had this in maybe one or two events where it was not many people milling around.
Yeah, definitely. It's got that mirror to like the Amazon Just Walk Out stores. When you first do it as an experience, it's quite novel and interesting, but then very quickly becomes the expectation. You find yourself the next day for self-checkout somewhere going, hang on, why can't I just walk out with this?
That's right. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And in fact, we had the questions around that as well. Like, is this something that Amazon are using? Like, is this a new Amazon service? And of course, it's just a proof of concept. It's not something we were selling. We give the whole source code available in a GitHub repository, right? So it really landed well with people, I suppose, because it was such a sort of complete use case.
Yeah, no, definitely. So could you maybe give us a bit more about like the architecture of it? What are like the big meaty components of this and how do they sort of fit together?
Sure. Yeah, I can give you a run through, a kind of diagram, a slide, if you like, if that's useful. Let me share my screen here. Share my screen. Which one is it? I'm going to go through 3 different screens here. Got it.
Cool. All right. Let's see if we can get that loaded up.
Bring that up, if you wouldn't mind, Ben.
There you go. Yeah.
So just to give you a kind of idea of the sort of throughput that this little demo was handling, we would do anything between 600 and 2,000 drinks per day, right? Depending on how busy the event is. So each order for an individual drink has about 15 events associated with it running through the system on the happy path. And at peak times, we were handling something like 71 drinks per hour at reInvent when we first ran this. This is how it works, right? So there's 3 applications. The first one is called the display app, and this is on a screen behind the barista on the top of the bar, and a user will come up here, they'll scan the QR code with their camera phone, and that will load up a menu on their phone where they're then able to select what drinks they want, and they can submit that to the system. And then you'll see items appearing on this display here in various numbers associated with that order. And they also appear on another display. Oh, this is the ordering process, right, on your mobile phone that you go through. So you select your drink, you get an order number, live update. You get a live update when your drink's being prepared, and when it's finally ready. And then there's a third app, which is what the baristas use. And this is where they can see those orders coming in real time using an open WebSocket connection. And they can then hit that green button there to say they're going to go ahead and make the order. That prints out a ticket. And when they finish making the order, they hit the green button again and they give the coffee to the user, right, along with their ticket. So that's the kind of workflow in real time. These are the services that we used when we were building this, right? So all three front ends are hosted on Amplify console. They're built in Vue.js. There's nothing too fancy about them. They're just kind of simple JavaScript-based application. The real complexity is in the back end, right, where we have Amazon API Gateway, we have DynamoDB, and we use DynamoDB to persist each of the orders that are going through the system. And we use API Gateway to create this REST API to allow you to authenticate orders into the system. But the real star of the show here is between Amazon EventBridge and AWS Step Functions, right?
Which your favorite topics on this show, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's why I'm here, right? To talk about
links becoming clearer.
Yeah. So here's what we had to do, right? When we first set about making this, what we actually had in the beginning was just a bunch of Lambda functions, all kind of linking to each other in various ways, command-driven, maybe event-driven for some, maybe some through API Gateway. And it was really difficult to kind of understand what our application was doing, how it was, how one function was sending data to another, how we were persisting data. So we tied it all together by first writing out the process of a single order, right? Literally writing it out in written form, which is something like this, okay?
Yeah, then when we talk about EDA, Ben, you're sort of almost describing there the event storming process, where you're thinking, what are the actual sort of real-life business events that happen, in what order, how do they all relate to each other?
Yeah, and I wish we knew that before we started. This was nearly 2 years ago, right? So we didn't really think about doing event storming. We didn't even know that we were going to be building an event-driven application, to be perfectly honest. And it kind of has evolved into that. We've gone through 3 versions now, and it is very much a good example of an event-driven application. But in the beginning, it wasn't that, right? So we've gone through this whole story that we see a lot of our customers going through, from initially starting by writing out big Lambda functions that have lots of code and decisional branching logic in them, and getting a kind of something working, and then stepping back from there and saying, okay, what's good about this? What's difficult? What's complicated? And sort of practicing what we preach, if you like, and separating that out into multiple functions, and then instead moving that into step functions and orchestrating those functions. And then step functions introduced this thing called service integrations. So we ended up peeling away a bunch of Lambda functions that weren't doing sort of computations. And so we've been through this whole process in the last 2 years or so of building a production-ready serverless application, which has been really useful for feeding back all of those different challenges back to our PMs, our product managers, and being able to talk to customers about the same challenges that they're going through, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to share as well, because as we talk about the architecture of these things, I think sometimes when we share examples, people assume that we just start with perfect and go, well, there you go, well, go have an example or a sample. And as you just showed, like, the reality is quite the opposite. It's get something functional and then just keep iterating and making it better as things evolve. That's right. Yeah. So this was our next iteration, right? Was to move some of that logic into a step functions workflow, which is a serverless service on AWS that lets you build workflows where you're orchestrating other services essentially, and you're orchestrating them with branching logic, if statements, loops, decisional logic.
we won't go super deep into what step functions can do, but it's super scalable and it's ideal for orchestrating a kind of conveyor belt process where you're going to start at one point. There's a series of things that have to be done, and then you have to finish at the end point, right? And everything around that, everything encapsulated within that microservice, you should or you can often orchestrate with a workflow, right? So that's what we did here. This is the workflow that orchestrates the ordering of a single drink, right? It's just called the order processor workflow. This is what it looked like in the first iteration. So we did things like the first thing the workflow does is make sure that the shop is actually open, right? By checking the status of this DynamoDB table. And then it makes sure that there's not too many drinks currently going through the system. So if they're already running, serving 20 drinks, open orders, then we take a different path and we refer back to the user to say, you're going to have to wait before we go ahead and do your order. And we actually shut down the ordering system at that point, right? So the system is able to react in real time to how busy it is to sort of throttle the orders that are coming in.
So you're saying that baristas aren't as scalable as some of our serverless services? And
that's our single point of failure with how many baristas we can roll out. Yeah, exactly that. And then the workflow does other things like waiting for the customer to submit their order using this step functions callback pattern. So what we do here is we show the user the menu on their phone and we give them 5 minutes to select their drink. And we pause the workflow at that point using this emit task token pattern. And when the user selects their drink, that sends a new request back into the system, which picks up the workflow and resumes it, and then goes ahead and generates an order number, right? So that's called the wait for task token callback pattern. And that's a really effective, powerful pattern that I think you'll see time and time again in event-driven applications where you have this asynchronous workload where you fire something away, but you don't want to move on until you know that's complete, right? So often you'll use some kind of polling mechanism to check that it's complete. But with step functions, you can literally send a command back into the workflow to say, okay, this is done now. You can go ahead and continue.
Yeah. Perfect.
So then we had our workflow, right? And that was orchestrating each drink. But there were lots of other components in this application. There was the database component. There was the REST API component. There was a counting component to make sure each drink in each event always had an order number associated with it that wasn't duplicated at the same event, right? Atomic, I suppose it's called. So we had all these microservices that were being used for various things. And we decided to use EventBridge to be the kind of central point where we would route events to communicate between those microservices. So we're using a workflow to orchestrate within the microservice, and we're using EventBridge to kind of choreograph those events to initialize and pass data around between the microservices there.
Yeah, I guess just to reflect on that as well, that means that, from that step functions workflow, everything is being done via events, and then the rules that are attached to those events. There's nothing where it directly signals another part of the architecture to go do something. So you've gotten out of that sort of command and control mindset. It really is that asynchronous. A business event happened. I presume someone's going to do something with this.
Yeah, and actually, we accidentally had it reaching into other services without really thinking about it, right? So at one point, we were checking a DynamoDB table, or we were starting another workflow asynchronously. And we realized, hang on, these are in other microservices. These are in different YAML templates. We shouldn't be reaching in. This shouldn't have, like, if we were just one team building this bit and there was another team building that bit, we shouldn't have permissions to reach into that. So we have to, again, kind of step back and say, right, how can we get info from that service without crossing the permission boundary, right? And again, good problems to kind of think about various ways of doing it. There was one other big sort of challenge that we had to think about here, and that is how do we get live events back to these front-end applications, right? The things are happening asynchronously. The baristas are actually there making a coffee, a real life coffee. It's not a machine doing it. And we need to know on our phone when we submit our order when that coffee's ready. And so we could have done this by polling, right? This is an asynchronous thing that's happening. There's no kind of path back to the client. So one way to overcome that is polling. Just check if the order's ready and keep doing that. But that's noisy. It's kind of not very efficient way of checking. You're never going to get real time because you have to keep an interval when you keep polling. So we use this open WebSocket connection to have a two-way communication. So the system calls back to your mobile phone to let you know when your drink is ready. And we achieve that by using a different service called IoT Core, which allows you to have this open WebSocket connection. And IoT Core manages the connections for you. So it allows you to scale out. If you use something like API Gateway, you'd have to have a service that is checking who's connected and if they're still connected and what that connection is. Whereas if you use IoT Core, all that's managed for you and it's all scaled for you, right? So as soon as you sign into the app on your phone, we make a subscription to that IoT Core topic, and then we just publish events to your individual subscription, and your phone will know when something has happened regarding your
That's a
order.
really important one as well, because I think when we talk about event-driven architectures, whenever we've talked about things, even on this show historically, whether it's to do with predominantly event bridge step functions or just some of the mindsets, we are often talking about back-end systems, and it's like system-to-system comms, whereas the challenge you've had here is you've got real people with the baristas who need to accept and process and move those orders sort of through their life cycle. But you've got customers sitting there waiting to find out what happened. And like you said, you've got that really chatty pattern of sort of pseudo real time with lots of polling with a very short interval. But actually by introducing IoT Core, which I don't think most people would see as being in that sort of serverless bubble, you've kind of got a really neat, elegant, pre-baked solution to that problem that interfaces perfectly well with things like EventBridge. So I guess the call out there is that if people have got that challenge, this is one really good example pattern for that.
Yeah, and once the pattern's set up, so once you have, once you've got the code to make a subscription to an IoT Core topic, and you have that set up for your web app, we were using Vue.js, right? We've run that in multiple other web applications now. We just add that little module, we create the topic in the back end, and from EventBridge, we publish events to that topic, and we have this live update of this real-time, almost near real-time update of what's happening, window into our system. It's just that initial tricky bit of setting it up with IoT Core is a little bit fiddly. But like I say, our source code is out there. It's available, so you can see how we did it and use that as a launching point, right?
No, that's great. Well, okay, look, well, let's that's probably a good point to pause, I guess. If people want to learn more about that, we'll post the link to the GitHub repo into the chat for you so that you've got that. And like you said, Ben, it's open source. I've had one of my customers look at this and threaten to fork it and turn it into a beer-based version that they're going to use for like happy hours and stuff. So
interesting.
All possible.
Yeah. That's funny.
So,
we're doing the same thing.
And there's the website that we'll share as well, which gives a bit more. I think the slides you were showing there are available, aren't they, where people can go and really sort of stare at that architecture for a while and sort of pick apart sort of quite how it works and stuff. But maybe a good idea is to show that demo of it if you'd like.
Show the actual thing in motion. Yeah, we can give it a go.
Yeah.
In fact, what I would suggest is the viewers can actually make an order as well. I'm not going to be able to ship a coffee to them, but they can use the system and see how it works, right? Let's see if we can get some orders printed out on this printer behind me.
Yeah, should we go for it?
Yeah, let's try.
Right. So
I'm gonna make an order as well, and I'm gonna be the barista. Here's my barista app on this tablet. I'll zoom in just a sec. And as the orders come in, I'll try and service them.
Yeah, so just while you're getting set up there, I guess, any questions on the architecture, anything like that, put in the chat, obviously, and we'll try and get to that during this stream. But if you've got your phone to hand and you want to scan that QR code, it'll ask for your mobile number. It'll send you a little Cognito token. That's to make sure that people don't abuse the system whilst they're at reInvent. We don't keep those numbers. We don't store them anywhere. So once you've got that auth token, you're in. You'll see the menu, and then the objective then is to flood Ben's office with prints from his little label printer behind him.
Let's do it.
Yeah. I'll do it as well, just to give you a another order. But yeah, if people here want to give it a go, please do. It's quite a cool little experience.
So this is the display. This is the display that will be in the coffee bar, right behind the baristas. You'll walk up, you'll open up your camera on your phone, and you'll scan that QR code. That will take you to an app where you can. Oh, let me just try and zoom in. With a menu. Here's my menu of drinks that I'm allowed to order, right? And I select one of these. Zoom in there. I'm going to select this one. And then I scroll down and I submit my order. And there you go. I've got a little queuing icon, and you'll see on Ben's screen that he's sharing that it will pop up in a minute with the order that's in the system. Do you see that, Ben? I don't see it, but you keep freezing on my screen.
No. I can see 3 in the preparing column. I can see order number 4 is an espresso. Someone's gone for coffee today. Not sure what that is. And then order 6 is an espresso as well.
Okay, so look, we'll zoom into here. My little setup. Here are these 3 orders that come in on the Barista app, and I'm going to go ahead and make the first one. Order number 4. There you go. There's my order number 4. So I would, whoever just ordered that will update their phone to tell them it's ready, and then the barista would present this to them on the counter, and I'll make the orders as well. Here we go. Order number 5 and 6.
There you go. So that's the baristas have got that, and I guess one of the keys there, and you mentioned it briefly when you're talking about the step functions workflow, is that the baristas have got the ability to hit reject on an order. So if you'd ordered, I don't know, something with like a syrup in it, like a vanilla latte, and they'd run out of syrup right now, they can reject that order and give that reason code, can't they? And the person will understand, okay, I'm not going to sit around expecting some coffee to turn up at some point. I understand it's been rejected at least.
That's right, yeah. So if for whatever reason they couldn't service the order, like they just run out of a thing, or I don't know, there was some things happened in the booth, then they can say cancel, and then you'd get an update on your phone saying, oh, your order won't be made. Go and speak to the barista. Similarly, they can close the shop, right? So I can press the button on here, which will turn off the QR code to stop orders coming in. So if our baristas are too busy, they've just got too many drinks on and they need to slow down, they can shut off the QR code, which means no one can submit any orders. So they're able to kind of create that throttle themselves. And it works the same way, right? This QR code has a live WebSocket connection to the system. So that's how we're able to do a live update.
Yeah. So that in terms of expanding this use case in the future, if you're starting to run out of things or if you've got new special things, the idea is you can almost drive all of those events from that barista view of the world. And that is in an event-driven decoupled way, updating the screen behind them, which I'm playing the part of the screen behind today. And then the users, the customers who are trying to sit there and order things have a real-time view of what's going on. And I think the thing with the QR code recycling here as well is a good thing as well, because it talks about that limiting. So I guess, again, you've got this counter underneath of 20 drinks remaining. If people start to call off from that total count will like decrement in real time. And again, that's WebSockets with IoT Core as well, right?
Yes, and that's another way that we throttle this single point of failure, which we can't scale, which is how many orders can the baristas make, right? So if we get 20 orders in a 5-minute period, then that QR code will turn off until that 5-minute period has expired, and a new QR code will be generated at the end of that. So that stops people sharing the code and like spamming the system, overriding the system. It stops the baristas getting too busy because they can only do 20 drinks in 5 minutes. So it's just another way that we have built in.
That's good. And I think I saw that in real time. So Werner's keynote at reInvent this year, he had his whole thing. I think it was 40 minutes of his 2-hour thing was all talking about event-driven architectures and a lot of the concepts and ideas we talked about before we then got into some of the announcements and the services. And during that, he actually showed sort of Serverlesspresso. So for this to be like a sort of a POC thing that your team have done to just sort of show off, hey, this is a real world example of that, to having it on Werner's keynote saying, go check it out. It created a bit more footfall. So we ended up having customers with their phones like poised at this screen going, come on, QR code, where are you? Wait for it to come up, and then off you go. But you can see the baristas, they're working flat out, but it's a very constant rate for them. They never seem sort of more or less busy than they were at any given time. So it's a nice way to show all this real-time nature of it.
Yeah, exactly. To have it built into the system was kind of a good way of doing it. And of course, we didn't have that in the first version. These are all lessons that we learned along the way from running this multiple times, right? It's been a really, like, it's not often as a developer you get to literally stand over the shoulder of a user and watch them use your app over and over again. So I would be watching literally 1,000 people come and use this one after the other and see all the little things they're running into.
Yeah.
So I recommend, if you can like get out there and stand next to your users, definitely helps.
That's the agile mindset, isn't it, when it comes to software development, is get it into the hands of users as quickly as you can and then get that feedback loop going and start to iterate and improve. So it's cool. So in terms of Serverlesspresso, I guess you're pretty much, barring any new features you choose to add, you've now got like a stable release. As you said, we've used it at reInvent, we've used it at summits. I know there's other events as well where you've gone sort of overseas and taken all the kit with you. I think getting into sort of one of the topics I wanted to cover while we've got you here for this, when it comes to Serverlesspresso, is maybe a little bit about the extensions idea. So you did a blog post on this. I think it was the start of December, wasn't it? Just about the announcement. Do you want to explain sort of the idea behind it?
Sure. So one of the great advantages of building an event-driven application is as you want to extend it and add features to it, because it's all based on events which are nice the system nice and coupled. You shouldn't need to go back and edit the core, the main part of the application. In order to introduce additional components.
Ben, I'm going to cut you off just a sec. Sorry, your audio is terrible. You've turned into a robot for some reason.
Oh, that's strange. What's happened there?
You're going to be able to just reconnect to your mic or something.
Is that better?
Try again.
No, better?
Static clip over it. You might just need to.
Let me just switch. I'm going to just switch to the display mic.
Okay.
Let's try this one. Is that any better?
Perfect. Yeah.
Let's try that. There we go.
I have to actually start again now, though.
How far did we get?
It was pretty much as you started talking.
Okay.
Extensions.
So extensions. One of the great benefits of an event-driven application is that because all the different components are communicating via events, if you want to extend that application with some other functionality, you shouldn't need to go back and update the core of what's already working, right? You should be able to see what different events are currently being emitted. How can I use those events to develop some additional component of my application, right? And so we wanted to prove that by saying, here's Serverlesspresso, here's the list of all the different events that this application emits, everything from when an order is cancelled to when you log into the application to when an order is ready. I think there's about 15 or 16 different events going on. We documented all of these events in a nice catalog to show what microservice is emitting them and what information they contain. And then we threw that out there to the community to say, okay, here is all the events that are part of Serverlesspresso. We challenge people to go ahead and build an extension to it, and we'll pull that into Serverlesspresso, and we'll run that in production at our next event, right? And we'll even, invite people to join us in writing a blog post about their extension, so we can see how beneficial it is to build based on events where you don't have to go back and update the core stack of the application.
I think that's an exciting one. I was chatting to somebody internally about this, Gregor Hopp, who, as we all know, Enterprise Integration Patterns, loves the event-driven architectures. And I was saying that this for me was a really neat illustration that lives up to some of the promises of event-driven, which is that this is showing an example where this new opportunistic future consumer is coming along and doing something meaningful in that architectural ecosystem, without having to, as you said, affect or change any of what's there already. So you have that isolated boundary. Perhaps this is something other teams in your organization have written, but you want to come across and do something useful with it.
Yeah.
And why not just be that sort of plug-in at the side almost, make use of those events, whether that's contributing to them by emitting them or doing something by receiving them via a rule, for example. So
yeah. Yeah, we actually we put out a couple of tools to help people build their extensions so that they don't need to download and deploy the whole app either, right? So all you should really need for an extension is the events. Okay, understand what the events are. That's the bare sort of essential of what you need. But to help people, we've actually created this little events player, which is just a step functions workflow, which simulates about 15 minutes of action at the Serverlesspresso booth. And the way we did that is we, at a real event, we just dumped all the events into an S3 bucket in JSON format, and we saved that JSON file, and we created a little workflow which plays them back in real time, one event after the other. So anyone who wants to build an extension can just deploy this little event simulator workflow, which will play events into your account, into a custom event bus. And you can use that to create your own extension based on routing those events, right?
Brilliant. Okay. Is there anything you can show us on that? If I can add your screen back in.
I can do. Yeah. Okay. Let me share my screen then.
Yeah, let me know when it's ready, and I'll add it in.
Oh, can you? I need to stop that screen and share a different one. I see how this works.
But again, just while you're getting that up and ready, this is a thing about these extensions. So there's the blog post, which we'll share the link to, that sort of goes a bit more into depth about sort of the mindset behind them and how to develop them. But then you've also got the GitHub repo, haven't you?
Yes. So I've gone to this GitHub repo here. Here's the GitHub repo, which is AWS sample / serverless coffee. And this has everything you need to deploy Serverlesspresso from scratch, if you so choose, right? Then there's a little extensions folder in here, which explains what the extensions are. Like we're inviting you to come and write.
Sorry.
Big pardon?
Are you able to zoom in just a bit on that? It's quite small on the screen share.
How's that? There we go.
Perfect. Yeah, that's good for me.
Yeah, so this is explaining what extensions are. It shows you how to deploy some of the extensions that we already have in here that people have submitted. And then it describes this event player, which I can actually show you. So I deployed this just earlier. I won't deploy it again because it takes a few minutes, so we don't want to sit there with empty time. But here is that event player as a little workflow. And I can just run it. Or you've got to give it, I think you have to give it an event ID. Let me see. Let's try. I think we give it an event ID.
Again, so if you're able to do at some point as well, that'd be good.
Every event that we run at Serverlesspresso has its own unique event ID, right? So we'll just make one up. And this is what it does. It loads a bunch of events in from that S3 file that we exported. Here's what one event looks like. Okay. So it has things like the name or the domain of the microservice that generated this event. So this one was from the validator service. It was that there is a new order. It's got a little message about what this is actually showing. And this was, I guess, a real order ID that happened whenever we recorded this event. And then it goes ahead and emits the next one. And all this workflow does here is it just iterates over that array of events. And it emits them every 5 seconds. So you can use that to route those events off when you're creating your own extension.
Got it. Okay. So you're literally just looping through a 15-minute capture of those events, and you're just introducing an artificial 5-second wait with step functions, throwing that into Event Bridge Bus. And so the idea is that if you are trying to develop one of these things, that you can sit there and almost enjoy sitting in the middle of a simulated event.
Well, you wouldn't just play this and then see what happened after, right? You'd build something where you're using this in real time to see how you need to route your events off from it, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of something that's being built. Okay, so here we needed something which would nicely round up all the different types of drinks that were ordered in any given event. So how many lattes were ordered at the New York Summit, for example, right?
Okay.
And so somebody made this extension for us, which is order metrics. And this is really neat. The way it's been done here is that he's using the order manager event that's called order completed. So this is a pre-existing event, which is part of that simulator. And he's made a new rule called order manager waiting completion to route that event to his new extension here.
Okay.
And what this does is it queues up a bunch of events in a bunch of new order events into a batch, waits for that batch to be full, and then it writes those events via a Lambda function to a new DynamoDB table, which aggregates the different orders for the different drinks at a given event, right? So there you go. Yeah. We can export this and we have a nice roundup of the total number of drinks and all the kind of breakdown of individual drinks. This is not something we had in our system. We just do a deploy of this template, and this is running now. We ran this at reInvent.
Got it. So in that case, you're talking about this is something that's been built after the fact, no changes to any of the core. It's using existing events that are already there, but now you have this new capability which you can optionally deploy in its own template alongside the rest of the application so that you can enjoy that. And I guess the example here is very linked to, when people talk about these opportunistic future consumers, an example we think about a lot is sort of the BI reporting side of it. And this for you is a good way to validate, maybe use this, plug it in and extend this idea with forecast and say, when we are sorting the baristas out for the next event in this place with this sort of customer profile, how much of each type of whatever do we need to order in so that we can satisfy these drinks, for example. So you can keep extending these things on top of each other, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. So that's already happened. Someone has already taken this. I don't think it's been committed to the repo yet, no. But someone's already taken this extension and extended that by making a CloudWatch dashboard for each of these drinks. So we can see visually, for each event, what was going on in the system. And on it goes, right? On it continues.
Exactly, yeah. So how do we, if I'm sitting here looking at this thinking that's quite an interesting idea, I'd like to contribute one of these. What's the way you'd go about it?
Okay, so you'd go to the extensions folder in this GitHub repo. The README tells you in detail like what an extension, what the characteristics are, how you can deploy this player to kind of test your extension, and how to submit an extension. But essentially, you fork this repo, you make a new folder with your extension, with your template in there, and then you make a pull request. And as part of that pull request, we ask you to fill out this file, this extensions model file, which basically just gives us some metadata about your extension, which we'll probably store in a nice sort of searchable, maybe on serverless land or something like that. We'll make this something that people can browse through in a nice way. But that's it. You just make a pull request to this GitHub repo. Essentially, that's all you really need to be doing.
Yeah. Okay. So you're literally providing that README in a standard format. You've got your template.yaml with all of your resources in, and that is just standard CloudFormation, I guess.
Yeah,
any reason people could use SAM or anything else if they wanted to, or is the preference to keep it in native CloudFormation?
Well, the preference is SAM. That's the templating language that the whole application has been built in. But if people want to use Terraform or CDK or CloudFormation or serverless framework, again, that shouldn't be an issue, right? Because it's all decoupled. It all compiles back down to CloudFormation anyway. So that's fine. Whatever you prefer, whatever you prefer using, really.
Fabulous. And because of that decoupled nature, I guess, again, the example you've showed is a JavaScript example in there as the template, but no reason not to use anything you like.
Exactly, yeah. Node is my preferred runtime for Lambda. Yeah. But it doesn't really matter how you want to make it, how you want to put together with different runtimes or service integrations. As long as it's based on events and it's doing something useful, we'll bring it in and we'll run it at the next show, and we'll write about it too. You can have your name potentially on the AWS Compute blog.
Nice. It's always a nice little prestige. So Yeah, if anyone watching has questions on anything we've talked about so far, please do get them in the chat. While we've got Ben here, it's a good chance to get some questions in front of him. And while he's got his Twitter alias up, and I'm sure you respond stuff there too, it's a good chance to do it in real time. One question I had, Ben, when I was thinking about this is you talked about the fact that you went through the existing architecture and almost like captured all of the event types that you had, and you talked about documenting those. So where do we go and read about those?
That is in, I think it's events. There's a URL where we have documented them. Let me just check the URL. Event. Oh, actually, if you go to the, if you bring up the blog post, it's listed in that blog post.
Fantastic. All right, I'll find that. And I guess the other side is that as well, if you wanted it in a slightly less browsable way, you can always go to the source code that you just showed and have a look at the JSON file that drives that state machine as well, that big lump of the example ones.
Yeah, exactly. But look, Ben, try this. Go to events.serverlesscoffee.com and you'll see a much nicer visual way of understanding what these events are. If you can share that.
Yeah, let's have a look.
So this was a little hacky tool, I suppose, initially, that was built by one of the guys on our team called David Boyne. And he built this, he's very far along on his sort of journey of building event-driven applications, and one of the sort of leading people out there and how you think about events, in my opinion. And he built this a couple of years ago as a way to document all the different events in your system, and you can import events from your EventBridge schema on AWS and visualize them in this event catalog. And it's actually a really beautiful way of sharing those events with other people in your organization.
So this is genuinely my first time seeing this. I'm gonna follow my nose and hit on explore events then. So okay, so you're able to sort of filter these down by the various services that are in there and then see these. Okay, excellent. I noticed as well,
open source, Ben. This event catalog is open source, right? So you can download the event catalog and point it to your own account, and you can visualize your own events and continue documenting them with this little tool here.
And you mentioned, and again, massively relevant topic right now. And I know David's been tweeting about this a lot lately, and he and I have definitely had some discussions, but on the importance of publishing and socializing the schema of events. So I know he's doing a lot about it, but this seems like quite a nice visual way to socialize these within your org, maybe. So if this concept, this sort of site is open sourced, I guess that'd be quite an interesting place to start to get some feedback on it. I think what's quite interesting as well is that you have events in here where there's no subscribers yet.
Oh yeah,
and this is again about modeling that business domain logic of saying it's a thing that happened. Maybe we don't have any need to do anything about it today, but somebody in the future might.
That's exactly it. We have more events than we've used, right? For something that, just in case it seems like this is an event, we should emit something here one day for use one day. This was the hardest part of building this. Once we decided to go down the event-driven architecture route, by far the biggest challenge was remembering what events we had, what was producing them, and what they looked like. And we constantly had to, pasting bits of script, bits of JSON back and forward between the team to remind each other about what was doing what. So I wish we had this in the beginning. It wasn't until right near the end of the application development that we came up and discovered this. But I definitely recommend to have whether it's this or some other format, but have a way of documenting your events from day one, where people can agree who owns what event and who is responsible for keeping them documented, right?
Yeah, when you can see what you said about the iterative process as well, because obviously the other thing with event schemas is versioning. This is advertised as being version 71 of this particular schema, which again just shows that sort of rapid maturity over time.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know until you know, right? You don't know how you're going to build something until you get to the end. So we went through multiple versions on all of this stuff. Yeah, and still there's more to go if you want to keep going with Serverlesspresso. But these are all the right challenges to be finding, I think, because then we can distribute some of those solutions back to the people that are watching your channel.
Let us take the pain so you don't have to kind of mentality.
Exactly,
I think it's really important to keep, I know I keep sort of bringing back to this whole, you've done lots of versions, you've done lots of updates, Ben, but I think the reason for that is certainly something I see with customers out in the field in real life, is that, you know, there's quite a proclivity, I guess, to almost, not procrastinate's the wrong word, but just to try and get the perfect event schema on the first go round, or to get sort of lost in that decision-making cycle where, so we could do A, we could do B, we've got no real good way to make that decision and go forward. So the answer is, well, let's talk about it some more. Whereas I think, you know, what you've illustrated here is just go for something, get it out there. And if you need to change it, change it. That's what versioning is for. And, you know, if you can negotiate with your schema consumers what those changes are, and you don't introduce anything breaking, if everything's backwards compatible, then great. There's obviously a need to validate these things as well, because you can't trust, I guess, in an event-driven world that all producers will produce for that schema in the canonical way either. So, you know, if you're reacting to an event with a given source and a given detail, and I'm a new bad actor or somebody who's not quite playing by the advertised schema, you know, people need to validate that what they're receiving is correct, don't they?
Yeah, and in fact, this challenge, I should say, really, it goes beyond building event-driven application. There's always, with AWS, like multiple ways to do the same thing. And they've all got different trade-offs, right? And everything you build will be, you can always do it a better way. I'm sure of that. I'm sure you can always go a bit further and do it a bit better. And I got caught up in this with something I was building yesterday. I was on version 4 of it before I'd even launched it, you know?
Right, yeah.
I wanted, you know, make it better. Oh God, I can do this. I can take away that Lambda function. I can integrate that. I can reduce this. And at some point you have to just get it out and then start iterating, I think. You know, so there's definitely trade-offs, and it's not just associated to event-driven architecture, is it? It's when you're leaning on services to build your application. You have to think, how far do you go down the route of implementing the service, where you get to a point where you're actually adding unneeded complexity. Like, what's the trade-off for that?
That's definitely a problem I suffer with as well. And it's you need to keep bringing yourself back to good enough is good enough. Just get started, and done is better than perfect. Those are two things after sort of daily reminders.
And I think people that are at AWS need to talk about that sort of stuff more often, really, because customers that I speak to are always wondering, like, what's the best way to do something, and is the way they've done it okay? Is it good enough? People want you to kind of bless their architecture, but you know, after maybe some performance and then some security consideration, just getting something out there is sometimes the best way to go, right? And then you can iterate on it after. But we don't know all the answers. We don't always know the best way to do something until you've done it, and then you reevaluate it, right?
Definitely. And I think sometimes it comes down to the sort of delivery methodology with this stuff. If you're still working in that project-based world where this really is your one chance to get it right, and then it may never be revisited for a period of time, I sort of understand that. But as people are emerging sort of more into either the agile delivery, DevOps kind of world, where you do get to iterate, you do get to revisit some of these decisions, then, like you say, get out, get the feedback, and you can always fix these things, prioritize it, maintain a backlog. Great. I'm sure if you had unlimited time to spend on this, you'd probably have all sorts that you'd want to do to it. But as you said, the fact is you can run it at reInvent and these summits, these massive places with real baristas, real customers, and people walk away happy and with a free coffee. So,
well, no, that's not the mission. The mission is people walk away having like sparked some ideas on how they can use serverless or how they can use EDA. And this was something we had to keep revisiting, right? Like, we haven't actually tried to build a coffee shop. We tried to build a demo of serverless tech, and we would be measuring the wrong thing. Like, how many coffees did we do? Is that a good measure of if this demo has been useful? Probably not, right? It's how many conversations have we had? How many people has this kind of inspired? What's led on after that, right? So it's always interesting to make these POCs. In fact, I would ask the people that are watching, what would be an interesting next thing that we could make that would help people solve problems that they're going through right now when they're building. I'm open to ideas for the team to start making something else now.
Cool. So this is like whatever the next big thing is that is akin to Serverlesspresso, but down a different path, maybe.
Yeah, like maybe not an ordering system. It could be anything, right? Because you can apply serverless tech to solve loads of different types of use cases. So the team's currently evaluating what we might build next for next year.
Definitely. Okay. All right. Exciting stuff. So I think we've got a few more little bits in the chat. Whilst people are just getting their last questions and comments in, we're here again next Friday. Friday after next, so 3rd of February. We've got James Eastham coming on again. So for those who've seen him before, brilliant. You'll know that it's always good for some good architectural deep dives. But the topic he's going to talk about is a little bit of what we've had today, Ben, which is the asynchronous mindset of this. So you showed that with the callback pattern and step functions earlier, but obviously going beyond that out to the wider serverless architecture, all the different ways. And I think it's something, as somebody who came to development via not the JavaScript route, certainly whenever I've gone down the JS path, that having to switch into that asynchronous mindset definitely still catches me out from time to time. So yeah, useful topic to get in on.
And a really important thing to like bear in mind with serverless tech, right? That's where it really shines. And with event-driven architecture is when you're leaning into that async way of building.
Exactly. Cool. Well, look, we're pretty much at the time where we need to start wrapping up. So we mentioned there's a way that people can learn more. We've shared the GitHub repo. People can obviously look at the whole thing or just look at the extensions bit that we talked about. And having that event catalog is definitely a really cool part of that. Do you want to just very briefly mention, and we'll share the link to the workshop as well?
I think it's s12d.com /coffee-workshop. Hang on, I'm going to try.
Okay. And what is that then for people? So I know we run it at events sometimes, but is that something that people can do self-paced as well?
Yes, so people can deploy 70% of Serverlesspresso stack, which is everything that is not step functions and event bridge. And then the workshop is a self-paced online workshop, which takes you through how to build those two components, right? The events components and the workflow component. And essentially you can build and deploy your own version of Serverlesspresso.
Cool. Okay, so you end up with it. You can see the different Vue.js apps you talked about earlier. So you can play the part of the screen or the barista or the customer in this and kind of go through and see 70-80% of it deployed for you, and you build the rest, kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah. It's a fairly new workshop that people really enjoyed at reInvent. So it's one that will soon be available in lots of different languages as well. We're working on translating it right now.
And I know you've got this on the serverless land page under the Serverlesspresso section as well. But in terms of the cost of people deploying this and running it, you know, what's the average cost of running this at reInvent?
I think the average cost it's on it's very low, but I don't want to say the wrong thing. Hang on.
Yeah, I mean, I've got it sort of front of mind. It's basically if you run this in free tier, it's free basically to do. I think it was 1,000 drinks on a day. The architecture fits within AWS free tier, so you still have access to that. Brilliant. If not, and you're completely outside of there, the cost of it is just over $8 a day.
Is that
$7.98 of that is the SNS cost of sending that validation text message out just to make sure people don't abuse it. So outside of that, the cost of the rest of the architecture, which is the web hosting, the API endpoints, the web sockets, the table to store all the state in, the event bridge events that go around, all the Lambda invocations and all the step functions with all the callbacks is all less than $1 a day for 1,000 customers. So
just to add to that, the workshop version uses email, not SNS. So the workshop version will be completely free. Yeah.
So yeah, in the free tier, this is free. So there's no reason not to go and just deploy that and have a play. And if it's sort of Friday afternoon, your time, if you're watching, then maybe that's something cool to do with your afternoon. Great. Well, we're at time now, Ben. So thanks again for joining us. We've got your socials up there as well. So if people want to reach out and ping you after this, they can do. But thanks again. Thanks for everyone in the chat for all their questions, all the interaction. It's been brilliant. All right. Well, catch you next time on the 3rd with James Eastham. Cheers all. you.